Your horror campaign isn't failing because your monsters aren't scary enough. It's because after 20 minutes, your players have already discovered your whole hand. The spooky voices, the dark hallways, a creepy child giggling in the next room, and they're literally just sitting there waiting for something to happen. You can't run a whole campaign off of those vibes alone. And believe me, I've been there. I've run sessions where I thought I was building atmosphere, but frankly, my players were just bored. So I want to talk about 3 shows that genuinely changed how I think about horror at the table. The reason I picked these 3 is because each one is doing something structurally different and useful that you can steal for your campaign. There are also 3 completely different kinds of horror, and between them they cover basically every reason a horror campaign either works long term or fails from the jump. The shows that we're going to be looking at in this video are From, which shows us how to make the world itself the threat, The Haunting of Hill House, which shows you how to make horror personal, and Archive 81, which teaches us how to keep players moving towards the thing they should be running from. If your horror campaign is missing one of these, or 2, then stick around. Uncle Flamey's gonna help you fix these problems. Something that I've found when I've run horror in the past, or I've been a player, is that a lot of GMs think that horror is an aesthetic. Low light, creepy descriptions, a monster you hide for 3 sessions, maybe some sanity mechanics if you're feeling ambitious. And all that works great for 1 session. It genuinely works once. The first time your players walk into your cursed town and you describe the smell and the silence and the way shadows fall wrong, it works. But then they sleep, they get their hit points back, they figure out the things live in the church, and now it's just a dungeon with a monster at the end that they have to kill. What's actually going wrong is usually one of these 3 things. The first is that the fear is generic. The scary thing isn't connected to anyone at the table, it's just a ghost or a monster or a cult. Nobody has a personal stake. No one is being specifically targeted by something that knows them. The second is that the world has no real threat behind it. Players are very good at adapting. The second they realize they can long rest, buy the gear they need to kill the monster, that tension evaporates and the world stops pushing back. The third is that there's no forward motion. The only available action is to be scared again. There's nothing to solve, nothing to uncover, and nothing dragging them forwards. There's just enduring it, and endurance is not engagement. So let's take a look at From. If you haven't watched it, I'm not gonna spoil it and go into great detail. The short version is that people are trapped in a town they can't leave. The roads loop, there are creatures that come out at night, they can only be kept out if you have a specific talisman, and you're inside before it's dark, and every new thing they discover about the town just reveals something worse underneath it. And something that From does extraordinarily well is that it makes the setting an active enemy, not a backdrop. It's more than just a location, it is an enemy. The first thing that I took from the TV series is that the premise itself should be a trap. Your players should not be able to just decide to leave, not through force of will, or clever thinking, or by burning a high level spell slot. The trap has to be real. The looping road in From is terrifying before a single night creature comes into play. The show has already said safety has been removed. The question isn't will we be okay, it's how do we survive the thing that's already won the opening move. This is kind of similar to Barovia and Curse of Strahd, but you could do it like a cozy looking town with a cheerful inn. Maybe the locals are under some sort of mental charm or compulsion, and they're constantly trying to talk the players out of leaving. Or it could be some massive ancient artifact that's buried under the village and guarded by a bunch of creatures, but the local townsfolk haven't had the opportunity to go down there and even know of its existence because they keep getting picked off by all these creatures before they get a chance to find out. And every time someone from the village dies, a new person ends up coming to the village. The artifact moves them from wherever they're traveling from in the world and just puts them in this location on that road that they can't escape from. What makes finding out the truth harder is that they can't go outside at night without being attacked by these creatures they know nothing about. You could use the talismans that they keep on the doors to stop the creatures from coming in. If you go outside, you have the chance of being caught by the creatures, or you're leaving all the townsfolk to fend for themselves potentially. It creates this unique tension where the townsfolk know enough of the rules that they know when one breaks, and that's where their fear lies. Why would we go anywhere near these creatures or outside at night, because when we stay inside, we're safe. And this extends beyond the talismans. Random is scary, but it's also exhausting. What's really scary is a rule that you trust breaking. If you give the world rules like doors matter, names matter, let your players learn these rules, like actually learn them and rely on them, and then later in the campaign violate one, not randomly, deliberately, and that's when you'll really scare the shit out of your players. Another thing is that pressure doesn't only come from monsters. From keeps escalating through other problems like there's no food, the new arrivals are disrupting the group, there's injuries, internal conflicts and distrust, and the creeping feeling that the place adapts faster than the survivors do. There's literally stretches in the show where you don't see a creature at all, and it's still oppressive. As a GM, if our only horror tool is a monster, then you're gonna run out of gas. We can use things like dwindling resources, or a safe house that gets compromised, or a disease that takes out a few townsfolk. Perhaps a new NPC in town is causing some disruption and doesn't believe that there's creatures that are gonna come out at night, and opens one of the doors and takes the talisman off the door. And another really important thing to remember is that if your only consequence is death, then your horror world is emotionally underfunded. Your world shouldn't need to kill anyone to be terrifying. Exhaust, isolate, divide, and corner. If your players feel the world grinding them down even during sessions without combat, then you're doing it right. The real important lessons that I learned from is that pressure is the foundation. The world has to be dangerous when the monster is off the screen. But even then, your players will eventually learn how to adapt to the map. They'll learn the rules and they'll start to feel competent in the hostile world. And that's when you need your second pillar, which is where The Haunting of Hill House comes in. It might be the most useful thing I've ever watched for thinking about long-form tabletop horror. And I'm not just saying that because it's the scariest, but because it figured out something that most horror media doesn't bother with. And that is that the monster or the ghost isn't the point. In Haunting of Hill House, every character is being haunted by something specific to them, either their grief or their guilt or a particular version of what happened to their family. The horror isn't one size fits all. It finds the thing each person is already carrying and it wears that face. And that's what makes horror at the table feel less generic. The second each player is afraid of something different. And I know just saying that it sounds like a lot of prep, but it's actually not. Before session 1 or even during play, you just need one thing from each character, not like a backstory, but a wound. Something that they regret or they deny or miss. Something they're ashamed they did. It's something that you could pick up along the way of the horror campaign. When they're settled in at night and they're having their talks about what's going on and their backstories, you can just sit there with your notepad and just write down what they're saying. Maybe even just add in a few prompts of stuff that you want to ask. You could even do this through an NPC, and then you build your horror from that. You might have a fighter who used to be a knight, and a ghost keeps wearing the face of different recruits that the knight failed to protect, and the face keeps changing, and there's never a final one. The other thing that the director Mike Flanagan does is that he gives multiple perspectives, revisiting the same scene from different points of view, and finding new horror in it, which does translate a bit differently at the table, but it still works brilliantly. They could be walking down a hallway and it doesn't have to mean the same thing to every character. Even an object in that hallway, like a portrait, or they hear a sound upstairs or a cold spot that's in a kitchen, you can describe it differently and let each character's private session note or moment carry different weight. It's so amazing when horror feels intelligent and it knows which angle to come from for each specific person. And there's one more piece of Hill House that I think about more than anything else, and that's stop treating backstory like trivia. A lot of us GMs collect backstories and file them. It gets mentioned once in a session or two, and then it just sits there. Hill House treats the past like it's still happening. Old dialogue comes back in new mouths and symbols reoccur. The unresolved thing keeps showing up until you deal with it or it breaks you. So when you're using it in your games, you can let locations echo a character's past. Like let old choices mutate into current problems. Use that backstory as horror ammunition. And even more than that, make the horror tempting sometimes, not just threatening. The scariest thing in Hill House isn't something that harms them per se. It's the moments where the house offers something like a reunion or forgiveness or one more conversation, a chance to undo the one mistake. And honestly, I find watching someone choose is always better than watching someone run. It's more amusing. Hill House's horror is like attaching to a person, not just the place. It's pure emotional pressure. It's personal, specific, character level pressure, and it can make players shut down and and protect themselves and start playing defensively, which is why horror needs one more hook. And that's where my personal favorite, Archive 81, comes in. And you've probably never even heard of this TV show because it was cancelled on Netflix. But there's just something about the way it was made and the sound effects that were used and the story that just really drew me in. It's basically about a man called Dan who restores old videotapes. He gets hired by a company to go stay in a remote location to restore a set of videotapes that were recorded by a woman called Melody, who stayed at an apartment complex called the Vizier that caught fire and was burnt down, and she was never found. And the TV series basically follows him restoring each tape and watching her story play out. He starts making all these connections that he shouldn't be making, and every answer he finds is worse than the question that preceded it. And this show understood something fundamental, which is that mystery is what keeps horror alive after the first shock, which is why when you're making a horror campaign, you shouldn't reveal your whole hand too early. It's a demon. Okay, great. It wants to get out, of course, and the cult is helping it. So now what? Now we know the whole story and there's nowhere left for mystery to live. So now all the players have to do is survive, and there's no wonder in that, so it's basically just combat. Something I love about Archive 81 is that it keeps layering. Who is this person really? What happened in that building? And who can be trusted? What even is this thing? How are these two timelines connected? Each answer opens into a better question, not like a random one, but a better one. That distinction matters, especially as GMs. Your revelation should earn their reveals. Each thing the player uncovers should make them need to know the next thing more than they needed to know this one. Do you know what I mean? Something else it does great is that it makes clues feel like things. Tapes, journals, audio logs, objects, buildings, and symbols. There's a physicality to the mystery that makes it feel real in a way that Expedition never can. Your players will remember objects, and they'll forget lore dumps, especially if you give them physical handouts. You could literally give them a damaged letter or an old recording or a map with sections that are deliberately erased, or a medical file with one page missing. It's something that you can keep adding to, and it will just keep getting pulled out the bag every session when they trying to figure out the next clue. Are they all connected? And another thing that I feel like is really useful for horror specifically is that uncovering the truth should cost something. It's not free information. The investigation changes the investigator. Their perception should shift, and they should sleep less or get obsessed. Relationships start to fracture under the weight of what they're learning. The clue is never just a clue, it's always a cost. The price of learning should always rise, and mystery should always give players agency in horror. Pure fear makes players passive. It happens to them, they endure it. Mystery gives them something to do with their hands. They're not just surviving the horror, they're choosing to pry it open. They're walking toward the thing voluntarily. Players will walk into a nightmare voluntarily if you convince them the answer is in the same room as the nightmare that they're hiding from. So hopefully I didn't ramble on about this too much and you actually found it useful. But the things that I have stolen from these three shows is that the world is a trap. Resources are failing, the rules are real and they're not on the player's sides. Time is pressure and safety is not available. Each character should be haunted by something different and specific. The horror is emotional or symbolic or personal, and the truth should be fragmented. The clues are physical, and each answer they receive should make the next question worse, and the investigation should cost them something. The pressure should keep them alert, and the personal horror makes them vulnerable, and then the mystery keeps them moving. That's a formula that I feel like works brilliantly. So how do you run horror in your campaigns? Did you find any of this useful? If you're a player, what's your favorite game that your GM has made for you? Do you think they'd find this useful? Share it with them. Let us know in the comments and let's get debating. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy, adventurers.